we are Marc and Jules, co-founders of Mindful. We started Mindful with one mission in mind, and that was to make calm more accessible, starting with the world's first tasteless L-theanine formula. L-theanine, for those of you that don't know, is a naturally occurring amino acid found in matcha, known to promote calm focus and relaxation. At Mindful, we make science-backed compounds like L-theanine more convenient and bioavailable, so you can feel more focused, grounded, and balanced in your everyday rituals. Mindful Mondays is our weekly behind the scenes series where we share real stories of building our brand, what's working, what we're learning, and why we believe the world needs calmer energy. Some weeks we'll dive into some product development, branding, and entrepreneurship. Other weeks we'll just be real with you and share honest conversations about wellness and staying grounded while building something from scratch. In this week's episode, we pick up where we last left off and we close out our Jade Leaf chapter, share a few highlights about building a brand along with some real pivotal moments that shaped our personal journeys. All right, let's get into it. Marc, if you want to take us through some Jade Leaf highlights, I will absolutely share some of mine as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think we can start from a purely business standpoint. Jade Leaf spanned from our founding of it to the point when it was sold to a private equity firm at the end of 2020. That was a span of about 6 years. And our growth trajectory over those years was actually pretty linear. So we got started in 2014, kind of midway through is when the idea first struck and we started to connect the dots to get the business going. That took a good 8 months. We had our first, pouch of culinary matcha for sale on Amazon in December of 2014. And I think someone bought it like right before Christmas, and that was a cool moment. The first time you sell
It's always the first ones,
to a
that's so
stranger.
neat.
Yeah, you'll never forget it. Because you're like, this person trusted something that I put out there. Anyway, so we really got rolling at the beginning of 2015. That was our first full year of business, and that was pretty much purely on Amazon, just doing what we could to build up our search rank, to get reviews on our listing, to improve our sourcing, to be more efficient with that and get better product and improve our packaging. We were iterating rapidly all throughout that year and frankly, all throughout the life of the business. At the end of that first full year of 2015, we had done about 500K in sales, which was awesome. That was enough for me to be able to go full-time right at the end of that year. My co-founder, Will, wouldn't go full-time until a couple years later when we were a little bit bigger and more stable, if you will. But from that point forward, the business effectively doubled year after year up until the acquisition. And a couple of those highlights along the way by 2017, I think, so this is now 2.5 years in, is when we became the number one ranked listing on Amazon. If you search for matcha, we were the top result. We had the most reviews. We had the bestseller tag. That did kind of step function the business when those things started to align, and we became the de facto matcha that people would buy when searching for at Amazon. That success there got us the attention of Walmart, who actually reached out to us and was like, hey, we see you're the top seller on Amazon. We've been noting matcha's popularity rising and rising. We want to get the very best on our shelves. Can you guys, sell to us? And we had never done retail whatsoever. We weren't even sure we wanted to. We knew it was a whole different game than the e-commerce game we'd been playing. But we were opportunistic, so we said, yeah, of course, and had a crash course in kind of retail sales over about a month, got set up on Walmart's somewhat complicated systems to be able to ship them product and field their orders and get our act together, I guess, in order to service. I think it started with about 500 stores. Eventually, it would go to all 4,000, I want to say.
Incredible.
So everything was kind of a learn as you go learning curve. But the Walmart placement did well out of the gate. People were buying it off the shelves at a high enough velocity that Walmart wanted to put us in more and more stores. That success got the attention of Target, who we not too long after got onto their shelves. So it was a very somewhat backwards path to go straight into a big box like Walmart. Most brands would start with a smaller chain of local grocers or start in the natural channel with like a Whole Foods, start in a few stores and kind of work their way up to the big stores. We sort of went backwards, but it worked for us. And over time, the business kept growing in each of these channels, respectively. Amazon was always the largest channel of where we were selling to the most customers. Retail was small at first, but by the time the company sold was a good 30% of the business. The one channel we always struggled with was the direct to consumer or the online store, if you will. And I think in retrospect, we could have done a lot more there and been more creative. We were just so focused on the channels that we had working, particularly Amazon and then retail, that we never gave it the time it deserved. This day and age, a lot of brands, their online web store is their number one channel. And that's a great thing because it's the place where you're able to really best connect with your customer, have that stronger relationship, be able to market to them in more creative ways and get feedback from them, ask them questions, present your brand in just the way you want it to be presented. So I think it is the best channel if you can get good at it, and one that will put a lot more emphasis on mindful and other projects going forward. But yeah, the Jade Leave journey was, I would say, charmed. We were timed correctly and we worked hard, of course, and I think we approached the channels in the correct way because of how the broader populace came to know matcha and learn about matcha. Amazon was one of the first places most people would go to educate themselves on what's out there. And because we presented so well there, that kind of gave us the foundation to become the preeminent matcha brand in the US. So yeah, when 2020 came around, again, our foundation online, particularly on Amazon, was very helpful when COVID hit and online shopping became the only choice and people were looking for healthy green tea. So the business actually grew a good deal that year. And at the end of the year, this can be a story for another time, the various reasons that led to us selling the business. Um, but it made sense to us, and I think it was correct for where we were at and what the team was looking to do as well. So we did decide to sell. Most of the team, or I think everyone effectively, stayed on at least for some period of time. Some are still there, in fact. Will and I both stayed on for 2 years before we officially kind of stepped back from a day-to-day role with the company. At this point, the new owners are operating it beautifully and doing really cool things. It's fun to see when they launch new products and
New
continue to
campaigns.
yeah,
Yeah.
continue to grow the brand. That means a lot. So feel really good about it. But I'll stop there. That's kind of the business trajectory. I know there's a lot of other highlights that we can touch on along the way.
Yeah. What a beautiful chapter.
It was. It was a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun
The,
things.
the height of our team was 5 of us. Yumi, Will, Robbie, and June. And the year and a half or about 2 years that we all were working together are my absolute fondest memories, and something I would hope that you and I are able to recreate in some ways or rekindle as we
Oh,
grow in life.
absolutely. Those are the parts, and I touched on it in episode 1 of the series. I was searching for that connection, that culture, and I very much appreciated how you and Will were very open to a people first culture. And that's what I experienced from you and Will in the care that you showed me, and not only me, but the team. And so how do we now kind of extrapolate that out and have that experience be kind of at the forefront? I believe your internal marketing matters just as much as your external marketing. If the people on your founding team understand what we're doing, we're all aligned on a mission, we all have a fire under us to see that through, people on the outside will feel that level of passion and fire. And, I know it's just the two of us right now, but as we grow our team, there's certain qualities or characteristics I think contribute to a really great founding team member. Culture is one of the most important things to a company. And I feel like more and more companies today are starting to understand that and put emphasis on it. But it's something that was absolutely one of my favorite parts. There were high points and really low points of that too. Like the human, it's just this multifaceted human experience going into the pandemic and all the things that happened along that way too that were challenging from a culture standpoint, because the company was structured remotely and it was at a time where that wasn't the norm. It wasn't normal at all. I think we were even exploring like, okay, do we have a headquarters here in the Bay Area? Do we all meet up, or is that in Portland or Seattle? But it ended up working in our favor, and we were still able
Yeah,
to
when
build a
everyone had
really
to go
strong.
remote, we were already
Yeah,
doing it.
we've been doing that for years, and so it worked in our favor, and still being able to create those strong bonds, although we all lived in different parts of the country. I think we're pretty awesome. Some people even lived in other countries at certain points too. And yeah, the culture side of it, definitely a highlight for sure. All the fun things we did as a team that I think bonded us. It helped us really understand each other. And especially in my own journey, a highlight of mine, I really appreciated June in particular.
Uh-huh.
June, very behind the scenes guy. He was our director of supply chain, but did a lot, even outside of his scope. And at the time, because I was so green and so new to marketing, there was a lot that I didn't know. And so he took the time to explain things to me and to coach and mentor me in ways. And I appreciate it. He didn't have to do that at all. He could have been like, this is your job. You need to know these things. But he slowed down, and week to week, we had conversations where he essentially was teaching me about analytics and how to read them and how to
Yeah, I think you
deliver
were
them.
wanting to be more driven by
Data
data, wanting
driven.
to understand
Yeah.
the data better to inform your intuitions, which were fantastic, but can always be taking that extra step when you really drill down and analyze feedback and
Yeah.
consumer behavior. Yeah.
And having a rounded experience of understanding the people, because at the end of the day, the business is for people. So do you understand people? But what are the people telling you through the metrics and the data? And that was an area that I was so overwhelming to me. I had no idea. I mean, that was never a part of the conversations I was in at my previous roles in education. So the fact that even that thing, June took time out of his day, his busy day, to coach me week to week and help me kind of, it was like a muscle that I was strengthening over time. And it got to a point where I was putting my own dashboards together, and he and I were going through unit economics, and I was breaking things down for the different product launches we had. And he was like, wait, Jules, did you do this by yourself? And I was like, yeah. So like even, the culture amongst the team, there was a care that we had. And I do trust and I do believe that we will, in our own new way in this chapter, see that through with people that care about our mission, who care about the things that the company will bring to the forefront. I know this is a passion of yours, Mark, so if you could kind of walk us through sourcing. I know we have some Matcha brand founders that also follow. They're a part of, we don't have a name yet for this community
Mm.
that exists in my close friends group on Instagram, but there are some Matcha brand founders, there are some business owners. Are there any tips, tidbits, things that you could share that could be valuable to them as they kind of embark on their own journey?
Perhaps I can tell our story, and
Hopefully
to the
there's
extent that it
enough
is
there.
helpful to others, hopefully they can pull some insights. And we're always open to more specific questions. So feel free to follow up. One could argue that sourcing was the most fun part of the business overall, just because how matcha is made and the roots it has in Japanese culture are so incredible. And to the extent that, anything we talk about here around how Jade Leaf evolved its supply chain that is helpful to others, I hope it is. But as always, if you have questions or want to follow up with more specific things, reach out to us anytime. But the sourcing for Jade Leaf was an interesting journey. When we got started in 2014, we were just two guys that had bought matcha from the store or from Amazon, and that's all we knew. So being that all we knew, we kind of scoured anyone and everyone that was selling matcha on Amazon to try to identify the ones who had a good product that seemed like they knew where it was coming from. They were more connected to the source. You could kind of tell the brands that were just sort of marketing fronts and the ones that actually were connected back to a farm or some sort of business in Japan that was exporting. So we did that, and we found one who was selling matcha that we thought was of good quality. We reached out to the business and said, hey, I know you're selling this under your brand name. Could we private label from you? And for anyone who doesn't know what that is you're putting your brand and packaging on a product that someone else is producing. So it was a gentleman who was actually a Japanese gentleman who had moved to Sacramento, had existing relationships with a farm back in Japan, was buying it in bulk, shipping it to a small facility he had in Sacramento, and was producing enough units to sell for his listings on Amazon. And he was definitely totally open to working with us, because we were going to place large orders, hundreds of units at a time. So we connected the dots, got our packaging printed, got it sent out to his little Sacramento shop. And, he filled it with the matcha that he was sourcing from this farm. And for about 6 months, this relationship worked okay, up until the point where in kind of mid 2015, we started to sell more than he could keep up with. He only had a couple people working with him to fill these pouches with the matcha he was getting from Japan. So we said, okay, well, this is a problem where we've outgrown our supply. Who do we even go to at this point? So we actually traced back the farm that he was sourcing from, because it was listed in the documentation. Everything was organic certified. So that being the case, there's a very clear, transparent supply chain from where it comes from to where it's sold. So we could identify the farm, and I tried to kind of research them on the web, and there's not a whole lot. The farms in Japan aren't, marketing guru businesses. If they even have a website, that's kind of a
Very
miracle.
ambiguous.
But luckily this one did. It was very basic, as you might imagine, but it had one important thing, which was an email address. And so I was able to shoot an email out to this farm, wondering if, anyone would ever read it. But sure enough, not too long later, an email came back to me I'll never forget it, in one of the most kind of broken English responses I've ever read, but I could tell it was the farmer, at least someone working at the farm, trying to say, hey, we got your inquiry and yeah, let's talk about it. But let me introduce you to a broker that we work with, so that he speaks English, so he'll be able to kind of work things out better. So we got in touch with the broker, and over the course of, a few weeks, kind of arranged for him to put together an order directly from the farm. And then we were off. The order arrived. It was great quality, the same, even better, in fact, quality than what we were getting from the gentleman in Sacramento. And it was packaged well and everything looked good. And we're like, oh, this is awesome. And for another 6 months, that worked out great. Our orders got bigger and bigger. The farm was willing to do new things. That's where we first introduced our ceremonial tins, kind of working our way up to having a broader catalog of matcha options. But yeah, another 6 months go by and those same issues start cropping up, where the farm is like, hey, these orders are getting a little too big. We're going to need a lot more time. Really, we have plenty of matcha. Our farm is large and grows a lot of tea, but we don't have the manpower to, package it into all of your pouches and tins in a timely manner. And so we're like, all right, well, that's tough. We love working with this farm. We have a great relationship. So we figured we could maybe start to buy it in bulk and find other facilities here in the US that could do the packaging and continue to work with this farm, but increase our scale by taking care of the packaging part. So that's what we thought we were going to do. And so we started looking for partners in the US that could do just the packaging piece. And very serendipitously in that search, literally in our backyard, Will was living in Hayward, California at the time, was a facility that was owned by a Japanese food manufacturing and logistics business. And they said, hey, yeah, we can definitely fill your pouches and tins with matcha that you're sourcing, but P.S. we also source matcha too, and we could kind of do it all for you. And at first we were actually very apprehensive about that, because we were like, no, we have such a good relationship with this farm. We know the quality is good. We don't want to spoil that. But to make the decision, we actually went out and visited Japan towards the end of that year and visited both the farm we were working with and this new provider that had relationships with multiple farms to get the matcha that they were sourcing. And in that trip, kind of realized that, hey, it's pretty clear here that in order to scale, to bring this business where we want it to be able to grow and serve matcha to as many people as we can here in the US, we need to go with this new partner. Because not only do they have the packaging capability, but they have sourcing with not one farm, but multiple, and the ability to source from even more. There was a network of farms that came to be called the Kizuna Farm Network that established this countrywide supply chain for matcha. The major growing regions for matcha are actually spread out throughout the whole island. And they were able to source from all of them and logistically take those raw materials, get them processed, get them packaged, get them to the US at scale. And that turned out to be maybe the best decision or the most important decision in the history of Jade Leaf was entering into that relationship, because they did scale with us over the years to come. And that capacity and access to that much supply is what allowed Jade Leaf to be the most affordable matcha on the market, the most comprehensive, for the quality that it was. We always knew that it was a function of, hey, we want to be as good as we can be quality wise and at as competitive a price as we can be for that given quality. That was always our guiding goal. And this relationship with this sourcing capacity allowed us to achieve that and maintain it throughout all the years that we were in business. So it was very serendipitous, as I said, but opportunistic at the same time. And we did our best to maintain relationships. You know, we still stayed in touch with that original farm. You know, they understood the situation. And I think, in fact, that years later, some of their matcha entered into our broader supply chain again, so it kind of came full circle. So yeah, it was a cool journey, and visiting Japan year after year to visit these tea fields, meet new farmers, check on production. That was one of the most fun parts,
Oh,
building
absolutely.
Jade Leaf overall. And Jules, I'll never forget the first year that you got to join us on one of those trips, because it was truly magical.
Definitely highlight of my life thus far. You, Mark, were my entry point to a lot of the matcha education. So when I started with my matcha pages, and as a matcha lover, I just knew I loved the way it tasted.
Yeah,
I loved
that's
the way
where
it
we
made
all
me,
start, right?
yeah,
Just falling in love with
tasted good.
the
I
powder itself.
felt good. But there wasn't much I knew outside of that. I didn't know about, honestly, a lot. In our one-on-one meetings, you would share and kind of pull back the curtain for me and be like, hey, do you know what these things are? And I'm like, I have no idea. And so we would have conversations about cultivars and sourcing and all the things that I honestly today geek out over. Those are the things, the variables in which I dial in tea or matcha, or the details I search for when I'm wanting to source matcha for myself for my own consumption. Started there. And the first Japan trip, my goodness, I got so emotional because I was like, wow, this is, it felt like a full circle moment for me to start with an Instagram page, just sharing my love for matcha, to now be standing in the bushes and being able to have access to touch the leaves and to watch them being processed was unlike anything I've ever experienced. And I know today it's a little bit more, it seems just from the optics, it might be easier for the everyday person to visit a tea farm. I know back then you really needed your relationships.
Matcha tourism, some of the suppliers have picked up on it and yeah, now offer opportunities to visit the farms.
Yeah.
I imagine they're a little more glossy, where you don't get in the nitty-gritty of how it's made and how the farm business operates. But nonetheless, you still get to see the tea field and experience the aromas and just the whole aura of it all.
I just remember Harima-san, he just pulled freshly steamed tea leaves, like a whole mound of in his hand, and just started eating them and like offered some to me, and tasted it, and
Yeah.
it was delicious. I loved
Yeah, he
it.
wanted you to identify like how they knew it was good.
Yeah. And it was such a life-changing moment for me that I will never forget. And segues into a highlight, at least for, I mean, I feel like it's a highlight for me, but I feel like it's one for you as well, was our limited edition collection. So you talked about quality and the things that I think really separate Jade Leaf, especially at that time, for people wanting to enter into the matcha space and they're exploring matcha, is, well, what kind of matcha do I like and what do I look for? There's so many options today. As an entry point, I think it's incredible, but we had an offering specific to the, matcha aficionados, the purists who wanted to refine their palates and develop them to taste the nuances and different cultivars or even single origin offerings. And so that was my personal favorite. I loved working with you on that each year. Got to sample. I remember receiving all these samples, foil pouches of the different offerings.
They were the best of the best. That was by
Yeah.
design. It was like, hey, what we would ask each tea farmer, hey, what is your very best harvest for this year? Which field, which cultivar turned out to be, your favorite? And those were the ones we wanted to showcase.
And we did. And such a special moment where back then there weren't many brands talking about single origin, single cultivar, even organic versus conventional. And we were starting to spearhead most of that conversation through this series that we released each year. I don't believe Jade Leaf is doing it anymore.
No, unfortunately, I wish they kept that one. But now, like you said, there's many other brands sharing matcha at that level and hopefully pricing it fairly. That's still something we try to do.
Yeah. I mean, given the state of matcha today, prices will likely increase not only because of tariffs, but the shortage and just the variables that go into what's contributing to it. For people who want to continue to develop their palate or their love of matcha is a sacrifice I think some people are willing to make, paying $70 to $100 for 30 grams or 20 grams of matcha.
Yeah, more and more. You start to draw the parallels, and we always tried to specialty coffee, how different beans from different regions of the world or different roasting techniques, all these variables can lead to a certain flavor note. Wine, I think, is an even more accessible analogy where people know that, yeah, different wines taste different. They're all made from grapes, but the grapes are grown in different ways in different places, processed differently, and those can all lead to particular notes. And yeah, I think in the beginning, when Americans were just learning of matcha, there was sort of a glossed over like matcha is matcha. It tastes one way. But just like coffee grew from like everyone drinking Folgers to now thousands and thousands of specialty coffee brands, which all have, particular tasting notes or aspects to them that people seek. It seems like matcha's on its own journey where folks are seeking out different tasting notes of matchas and picking out like, hey, this one is more umami, this one's sweeter, this one's more acidic. Actually being able to identify those differences and appreciating them and enjoying them
Yeah.
is really cool to see.
That is really cool to see. And one thing, I know we have a lot of matcha lovers who have
Yeah.
started to support Mindful, so thank you all. One thing along your matcha journey, if I could just press upon one thing, is to just have fun with it. I know that there's a lot, especially today, there's so much education and matcha creators who are sharing from their perspective, this is what makes good matcha, but really you decide that for you. Your palate is unlike anyone else's palate. So it's such an abstract expression of your experiences that you've had, the food that you've tasted. So if you enjoy a particular matcha that someone else may say isn't of great quality, to each their own.
Yeah.
Enjoy and have fun with it. Just expand, taste all the different kinds of matchas. There's so many.
No, I think again the wine metaphor helps a lot where sometimes people tease sommeliers. Uh, they'll be given a blind taste testing of a $10 wine and they'll say how exquisite it is. That is really the truth, right? Like price is sometimes helpful, but often not very indicative of how enjoyable something actually is. Expensive matcha tends to be expensive because of a rarity factor, not because it cost more to make or went through some more premium process or whatever. It's generally a rarity and the brand's ability to tell a story about that rarity and convince you that it is worthy of such a high price tag. And maybe that is warranted. I think a lot of people abuse it. So always trust the brand you're buying from is pricing something responsibly to you. I think there is a time and a place for pricing a rare thing more highly because it's coveted and a lot of people want it. So you need to make sure the folks that really, really want it are the ones that get it. But anyway, just because matcha is expensive doesn't mean it tastes that
Good.
much better. In fact,
Or is
some of the
higher
more
quality.
yeah, some of the more expensive ones I've had were not good at all. So again, to Jules, your point, to each their own, kind of celebrate your own journey. Be honest with yourself about what you actually like and don't rely just on price to kind of tell you what's good.
Just trust your palate,
Yeah.
and your palate will tell you, because what I might taste as one thing, you might taste as something else, and we're drinking the same offering. And
Yeah.
none of us are wrong. It's just a different experience that we're having. But
A
yeah,
lot of
I
people love
digress.
two buck chuck wine.
Hey, I don't drink anymore, but when I did,
Yeah.
that did it. That did it for
Right?
me.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Acquisitions can be very exciting, and I think from a founding team lens can also be somewhat challenging, is the real human experience. So from your perspective, what are some highlights or some things you want to share about what that experience was like and how that kind of fled into what we're doing today?
So the decision to sell the business is not one obviously we took lightly. And the acquisition occurred at the end of 2020. We started having conversations kind of earlier that year. And I've talked about this in other interviews, but it came down to for Will and I as the owners of the business and stewards of our team who also had ownership themselves and had a stake in what we were doing. We sat down and kind of asked ourselves a few questions like, hey, we've gotten this business this far. What is it going to take to get it to the next step, the next level? Are we still equipped to do that? And we weren't sure, candidly. One validation point that we sought out was funding. We said, hey, if someone's willing to invest in this, who's like a serious experienced brand founder or brand investor who can kind of shepherd us and give us some more growth capital to, again, do this abstract thing of taking it to the next level, then maybe that's the validation we need to pursue that. And we went out and we talked to numerous investors and we laid out the pitch. The business was extremely healthy, profitable, making money, had a great team, had, growth prospects. But the challenge we ran into was that the market was not clear how big it could be. I think even to this day, people are still wondering, hey, how big is the matcha market going to get? And it keeps getting bigger year after year. And, it's as big as it's ever been. And there's the matcha shortage apparently going on this year that is drawing more attention to this idea that, yeah, demand for matcha continues to rise. So maybe that was a miss on their part to not properly size the market opportunity. We always thought there was more room to grow and will continue to be for some time. But the investors couldn't really see it. So that was one reason they couldn't, get to the point of saying, yeah, here, we believe in you, let's do this. The other one was that Jade Leaf was already the #1 matcha brand in the US, which is great. But again, from an investor standpoint, you'd say, hey, there's a somewhat unknown market and you're already at the top of it. So where is this next big room to grow? If, in contrast, if you can think of a different category where there's, a #1 player who's doing this much business and then a #2 that's doing this much, then an investor can get really excited and be like, hey, #2 guy, we think you can at least take some of what that #1 guy is doing. There's obviously a ton of room to grow there. So let's do it. But we were already #1 and there's no one to compare us against, no market size that could make it a clear, good bet. So all that is to say that the investment route was not available to us. So once we understood that, the next question on our minds, well, hey, is this our life's work? Is this a family business that we want to pass on to future generations? We said no to both of those questions. Whereas we were very passionate about matcha and building the business of Jade Leaf, we didn't feel like, yeah, this is the only thing that we were meant to do on this planet. There were other things we wanted to pursue, other passions, other insights. So we said, okay, if we want to make time to do those, do we then hire someone to continue running this business, or bring on more team members so that we can step back? And that didn't make sense to us. We didn't want to break up the great culture that we had with the team at the time, or we thought it might materially change how things were going, not in the way that we would like, and we'd feel compelled to continue to put time into it when the whole point was for us to be able to step back. So we were like, that's not viable. That feels like a half step and one that's not going to put us in a good place. So the final option then was to say, hey, maybe there is someone who would want to buy this business from us, retain the team at least for as long as they want to be there, be a good steward of what we've built from a community and a product and a sourcing relationship standpoint, grow this business beyond what we are able to. And at the same time, allow us to kind of enjoy some of the fruits of that 6-year labor. Because for both Will and I, for sure, we had, we'd invested basically all of what we had into it. And it had grown, but we hadn't been able to enjoy the fruits of that growth, and wouldn't be until such an event like an acquisition. So there was a lot of stress with that. It was kind of like having all of your chips on the table at a casino and everything's on one bet and it's looking good, but at any time, like it could disappear. So that was a stress we wanted to take off of ourselves, which opened us to the idea of potentially selling. So we started to engage folks that were familiar with the world of selling businesses and buying businesses. And through that, eventually came to find a private equity firm called WM Partners, who seemed to us like they checked all those boxes I said earlier. They'd be good stewards. They were going to, their whole thesis was to buy great brands and kind of combine them into one big team that can service all the brands together and create efficiencies and grow them all at the same time. They had done that once before, and they were starting to do it again. They had already acquired several great brands like Ultima Replenisher and Great Lakes Gelatin, kind of brands that we would be peers of. Were we to go through with the acquisition. And over, the course of a number of months, went through all of the, what they call diligence, which is kind of a back and forth of them really digging into our business and us learning more about them. And eventually came to a point where it made sense to all of us that, yeah, this is what we want to do. This feels like a good deal to us, and the right move for the business overall. So literally on December 31st, 2020 was when we signed the papers to hand it over. And as part of that deal, we would stay on for at least 2 years. Will and I, the team could stay on indefinitely and could leave if they wanted to, or stay and continue to work. And so we did that. And those 2 years were really great years for the business. It continued to grow at a wonderful pace. We had more resources now to grow it with. And we could, we felt like they were doing right by the business. But by the time that 2 years was up, the idea was, hey, do we continue to stay on as now employees of this business, or do we, strike out and go work on other things? We decided to do the latter. And I suppose that kind of segues us to what we're doing now. But yeah, that was sort of my perspective. I think in retrospect, or in the time, Jules, you and I have talked about this a ton, the kind of the psychology of it all. Yeah, the best way to describe it is a bittersweet feeling. Like, yeah, your baby is grown up, and you kind of sent them off. Now they're not yours anymore to shepherd. So that feels like a loss in some way. As we discussed before, there's certain things that Jade Leaf is not doing anymore that we thought were really amazing parts of the business. So it's a little sad to see some of those go. But again, in retrospect, for me personally, I can't speak for everyone, but for me personally, it does still feel like the right move to have sold it at that time. I think if, in a different circumstance, in today's position, feeling more secure and comfortable in things and wanting to, take on new projects again, I think, if we had Jade Leaf right now, I wouldn't sell it. But for the reasons at that time, that setting, I think they were valid and the right move, at least for Will and I personally. And I want to, feel like the team also feels like it was a good closing of the chapter for them. But again, I can't speak for you, Jules, so you can give your perspective on it all.
Yeah, I think of the team, I probably had the most difficult time, although it was very exciting. Very exciting to have been a part of growing this company, a successful company. I think personally, because I was so involved in the community side of the things, and things like the limited edition collection, the things that I felt like really separated Jade Lee from brands at that time. It struggled a lot with that. And so I stayed on for a year. I chose to exit a year after that. But in retrospect, I'm very grateful with how everything played out. I had a hard time with that. And I think for me, in ways I kind of romanticized Jade Leaf and the things that we talked about wanting to do, and realizing, oh, those things are never going to happen. And so I think with that, now bringing that energy into Mindful, like, great, we're at the helm of this. There's so
we're
much
back in control of the destiny, right? Like,
yeah,
we can do the things that we want to do, which feels amazing.
that feel very people focused and community rooted. We touched on this before, how you and I operate just as individuals, passionate, distracted, but also loving our autonomy. I think I struggled in more of that corporate setting of
Me too.
the way I could tell, Mark. I could tell you were going through your own grieving process, though we never talked about it I could tell some things were challenging just because I know you. And I'm like, oh, like he's having a tough time with this. I think with just the restructuring of things that once worked for our team and now having to acclimate very quickly to the new way of doing business. And there were things that I thought were very helpful and things that I felt like I see a different path, and recognize that the path that I see isn't the path or the direction we're going in. I made that decision to transition out. I took a little hiatus from the tea industry. I really missed it. I learned a lot. And so I feel like there's so many things that I can draw on from that experience that have helped me today, and things that I will bring into mindful today. Learns, the failures. I mean, I don't believe in failures. I think they were all learns that help with decision making, or things that could make us very successful in wanting to bring our mission forward. There are no regrets. I'm very grateful for how things panned out. And although they were very challenging, I might have cried sometimes, but I think that there's nothing that I would change at all with how everything happened. It was
No,
all
yeah, it feels meant to be in certain ways, and here we are. And I think I was gonna say, Jules, your temperament and your skill set and the way you look at things, you were born to be an entrepreneur, and I'm very excited to be a part of your journey
aw, thanks,
into
Mark.
starting a business. You were doing things as a founder would at Jade Leaf. To your point, is why it felt extra hard for you when when the business got acquired. But now you get to do those things as a founder, as a true founder and partner in this, which I think you'll really, really shine at. So yeah, excited to do this with you.
I'm honored to be your co-founder. And I think for people, I feel compelled to share this because there are some people here who are wanting to embark on their own journey, whether it be a business, a passion, something that they're wanting to explore, but they don't quite feel like they're ready, or they don't know what next step to take, and the step is to take it. But that's the best recommendation I have, because at Jade Leaf, when I knew nothing about business, nothing about marketing, I just I felt the fear and I did it anyways. That was kind of the spirit I would bring into everything. And they were scary, so scary to not know and have high self doubt. And I know many women, in particular people, but women specifically, experience imposter syndrome. And of course, you feel self doubt because you've never done the thing before. And you're starting to do the thing, and that's where you learn. So we all are going to fail at something, but if we can take those failures and rebrand them as lessons. I'm very proud of the jewels from the Jade Leaf chapter because there was a level of ownership. I mean, I did have ownership in the company, but there was a different level of ownership I felt over the brand, where I was in front of a lot of things that many brand partners we had assumed I was one of the founders. And that's what I think, now sitting on this other side of it as one of the co-founders of Mindful, those are the types of team members I would love to hire, people who feel the level of fire and ownership and passion for the thing that we're building. And it's rare to come by, but I'm glad that I didn't say, you know what, this isn't my job you hired me to do, I'm not going to do it. I think many people are having that conversation of like honoring their boundaries. But if you really want to attain a level of success, you want to grow, you want to challenge yourself, it is on the other side of the thing that you aren't already doing. And so you have to actually stretch yourself to prove, essentially to you, I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time, to show you, hey, I'm in this with you and I'm willing to do the thing. Yeah, I don't know. I just felt so compelled to share that. But
No, I love it, Jules. And I agree, especially in this type of setting, in early stage business, you got to stretch yourself and do things that you haven't necessarily trained to do, but you can learn as you go. And that ability to learn as you go is one of the biggest assets, I would say, to a founder or early team member. Uh,
that is true. What was your first job? Like, what would you consider your first job? Because I have mine that I want to share, and I think kind of it makes a lot of sense to me today. But
my first job, I mean, if we're talking like high school, I was a snack bar attendant and lifeguard in the summers. So that was my first
when you love snacks,
true job. Yeah, yeah, I always loved snacks, and that was a good place to be. No, but And then I did internships in college. My first job was working for a friend of mine, started an advertising agency. And I went to work with him immediately after graduating college. And I worked with him for about 2 years before moving out to San Francisco
Mm.
to manifest my own destiny in some sort of entrepreneurial way. It was not clear at that time what it would be. Um, but uh, but no, it was very fun for me to work with this friend of mine on his agency. It was we were doing digital marketing. This is, 2010-ish time frame. So that, the iPhone's just coming out, websites, people are still figuring out how to do online stores and run ads and stuff. So we were doing all those sorts of things, and it was a small, growing agency. And similar to how I think you felt about your role and your journey in Jade Leaf, that very much was me,
Mm.
this agency. I wasn't a founder, it was my friend and his business partner were the owners. But when I joined them under the impression that, like, hey, I wanna be in this with you guys. If it's not ownership, maybe some sort of profit sharing. I want to feel like I have a stake in this thing. If I'm not going to go start something myself, this is the level of involvement I want to be at. And and again, similar to you, Jules, I was doing my job, which was more project management at its core, but at the same time trying to also be involved in, well, how is the business growing? How are we creating culture? How are we developing team members? How are we going out and getting new clients? I wanted to have my hand in all of it. And they allowed that, which was a really, really cool learning experience, and felt very meaningful. I felt very, committed to the business as a result. But before long, got the itch that, like, I recognized, I think as you have or did, that yeah, you can commit yourself to that degree, but there's always going to be a difference between that early team member and being actually one of the founders of something. Um, and I knew I owed it to myself to go try to start my own thing, or get folks together and become the owner of something, and not just an early team member, which you are doing now yourself. So yeah, a lot of parallels, I would say. But yeah, that was my first job.
Wow. Snack attendant and you're a swimmer.
Yeah, the snack attendant and lifeguard in high school stuff. Yeah, that made sense. It was very fun at the time. It wasn't very career oriented, but it
I
was fun.
see. I see. I see. Very cool. My first job, and I think you might appreciate this. I didn't realize what I was doing then, but
Mhm,
now it makes a lot of sense. I was very opportunistic. So in middle school,
mhm.
it wasn't an official job, but I did many things like this that honestly got me in trouble. I was in the counselor's office a lot. But my science teacher at the time, his name was Mr. Morris.
Mhm.
I believe it was every Wednesday, would sell hot dogs. So he had a crock pot full of Costco hot dogs. He had the buns, he had all the condiments. He would sell muffins and all these things. And I would get there early because I wanted a hot dog.
Mhm.
So I'd be one of the first ones there to get a hot dog. He sold them for $1. What a steal, cheaper than Costco hot dogs.
Yeah, the undercutting hot.
And I would sit there in class while everyone's trickling in, and I would eat my hot dog, and I would be watching how popular Wednesdays were
Hmm.
specifically. And so over a period of weeks, I would watch this. I'd get my hot dog and I'd just watch him sell through his hot dogs. So one day I got there early again, and I bought all of his hot dogs. And he was like, "You want all of the hot dogs?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I'd like to buy all of your hot dogs." So I bought, I believe like it was like 20 of them is what he sold. And in front of him, I sold them back to the students for double the cost. And he was so mad. He was so mad at me.
Wait, I wouldn't call that a job.
No, but I did many things like this though. These were jobs I created for myself.
I see, I see, I see.
I would buy candy bars from Target and I would sell them for I mean, because it was, school, the candy bar, the snack bar. So I would be your competitor essentially in that sense.
I love it. I love the scrappy young entrepreneur stories, like, selling gumballs or whatever, the lemonade stand even. I actually don't have one of my own, which is sort of,
Really?
I think. Yeah, yeah. I don't, I
That's
think it discredits
surprising.
me.
I would be a
As an
competitor to
entrepreneur,
you at
but
the snack
I'm
bar
glad.
because the snack bar stuff wasn't great. So I bought all the popular candies and snacks and I would sell them for double what I bought them for.
Was just an hourly employee. I was lame. So I admire that you did all those things and yeah, bring that entrepreneurial
Bring
cred
that
to
fire,
this.
bring that fire here. I got in trouble a lot. So technically my first job was with my aunt who started a nutrition company actually.
Mhm.
She came from the Philippines with very little money, started her business selling supplements. It's still around today, and I worked under the table for her. Didn't realize what I was doing was actually marketing, helping her with her packaging.
That's the
I
best
would
way.
actually it
Best way.
was like in Photoshop, like putting it together. They still they look exactly the same. They have not rebranded.
Right.
She's since then passed, but yeah, I would be helping her with putting the packages together, go to some of her events to sell them, things of that nature. So, very similar. The series is called Mindful Mondays, but because our company is very much inspired by the work that we did as we worked in the matcha industry, felt like it was important that we talk through at least our journey that led us here. So hopefully it was valuable, entertaining, something along the way that kind of helps you understand what we're hoping to do with Mindful today. Our next episode will dig into all things mindful. So we'll talk about the inspiration for the company, how it all started, and our hopes.
Send questions anytime.
Yeah, ask questions anytime, whether you want to ask it here in a
It
comment.
helps it be more interesting.
Yeah, so give us feedback. Like, is the lighting off? I know we gave ourselves feedback. Our
Mhm.
first episode felt too choppy. And
Mhm.
so this one will be a lot more seamless. It won't be as jarring. No
There may
one
be
gave us
more.
that feedback. You guys were all very kind. But, as anyone is, we are very hypercritical of ourselves. So we're learning as we go and open to feedback, open to questions, anything that you want us to talk about. If there's anything we discussed here that you want us to go deeper on, we're happy to do that too. So thank you all for being here. We appreciate you and have a great start to your week if you watched on Mindful Monday.